2.2 is dividing fractions. All right, so to start off with dividing fractions, you have to understand what the word reciprocal means. So you have two numbers whose product is 1 are called reciprocals. To write the reciprocal of a number, you write the number as a fraction, and then you simply invert the fraction. So let me show you as an example of what reciprocal is. So let's look at this picture. I just took this right from, well, my computer screen, but it's from the book. When you invert a glass, you turn it over. So here's a glass, got water in it. If I'm going to invert it, I pour it out, and the water pours out. So basically all you're doing is you're flipping the actual glass. You're turning it over. So for instance, if I have A over B, and I was going to show you what the reciprocal of the actual fraction would be, all I would do is take A, and it would become my denominator, and I would take B, and it would become my numerator. So this ends up being the reciprocal of A over B. If I gave you 1/2 and I said, what is the reciprocal of 1/2? You would just flip-flop the two. So I would say 1/2 equals 2 over 1. And as you can see, this makes a huge difference in what the value of the fraction is. If I wrote this in like a pie graph, or pie chart, 1/2 of this circle would be what I just shaded there. If I were to do, that would be 1/2. If I did 2 over 1, well then I've got 2 whole. And this would be what my picture would represent. So that makes it quite a bit more. Now I have 2 whole compared to 1/2. So the reciprocal changes the number quite a bit. So example 1 is just that, writing reciprocal. So I'm going to give you an original number, and then you're just going to write that fraction as a reciprocal. So if I had 3/5, that's my original number. How would I make it a reciprocal? I would just switch the numerator of 3 to the denominator of 3, and the numerator of 5 to the denominator of 5 to the numerator of 5. So you're really just flipping the whole fraction. If I had 9/5, do the same thing. My 9 now goes on the bottom, my 5 to the top. All I'm doing is showing you what the reciprocal of a fraction would be. If I have a whole number of 2, remember, 2 as a fraction is 2 over 1. So the reciprocal would become 1 over 2. Now, what I want you to do to check out to make sure that your answer would be correct, you have to remember that the product of a non-zero number, its reciprocal, is 1. So what that means is if I have 3/5 times 5/3, looking at my cross factors here, I've got a 3 and a 3 and a 5 and a 5. We know that if I just cross them out, that equals 1, 1, 1, and 1. So in turn, this equals 1. Same thing with 9/5 times 5/9. It equals 1, because I can cross these as I go. Same thing with 2 over 1 times 1/2 equals 1. I can look over these and keep them crossed out, and they all equal 1 across the board. So that's how you can check to make sure your reciprocal was correct. So the key idea of dividing fractions is basically to divide a number by a fraction, multiply the number by the reciprocal of the fraction. So what this would look like in numbers is something like this. So if I had 1/5 divided by 3/4, I keep my first fraction, that's why I'm leaving it in green, and then I'm going to change my division sign to a multiplication sign, and then I'm going to flip my fraction of 3/4 and do the reciprocal of 4/3. Okay? Algebraically, it looks like this. A over B divided by C over D equals, leave it, change it, flip it. And then that is basically what our lesson is based on. So let's go on to example 2 after you finish writing that down. So example 2 is dividing a fraction by a fraction. So if I had a problem like this that said find 1/6 divided by 2/3, this is how I would expect your work to look. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to leave 1/6. So we leave it. The next step is we are going to change the division sign to a multiplication sign. And then the third thing that we're going to do is we're going to write the reciprocal of 2/3. We will change it to 3/2 or 3/2. So what I've done here, and I like to have you write it out like this, is you leave it, then you change it, and then you flip it. So leave it, change it, flip it. That's how you do a division problem in with fractions. So now that I've done that, I'm gonna zoom this out in a second, and so we can solve it. Now I'm left with a multiplication problem with fractions. If you can multiply fractions, then you're in good shape. So now I just do out my multiplication sign, or my multiplication problem. If I've got a 1 and a 2, there's nothing I can do. I can't cross factor them. But I have a 6 and a 3 here, so I can cross factor those ones, because 3 can go into 3, and it can also go into 6. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now I just go straight across. I've got 1 times 1 is 1. And now I've got 2 times 2 is 4. And that would be my answer. So dividing fractions is actually not very difficult at all. It's just the point of remembering these little rules. So we leave it. You can write this below. Is our first one. We change it. And then we flip it. And the flip it part is just taking the reciprocal of the fraction. Alright, so that's going to end our video today, and I have 4 try it problems for you. Remember, you leave it, change it, flip it. Go ahead and at this time, please pause it. That way you can see the answers. I'm going to work them out on the next page so that you can figure out if you made a mistake or not. But pause it at this time, and then you can go on to the answers, and that concludes our video. Make sure you check your work and you have done the cross-factoring as I show you here.